phone. Senator, tell me your thoughts about this trial. And I mentioned the fact that you clerked in the Supreme Court because you understand the law and the Constitution from all years' experience. So you tell me your thoughts on this.
Well, Greta, I have two simultaneous sentiments. Number one, I'm angry, I'm furious. And number two, I'm heartbroken. I'm angry because we're seeing a grotesque abuse of the justice system. It is a travesty of justice that has unfolded in New York. And I'm heartbroken because the rule of law matters in America. You and I both have spent our adult lives fighting to defend the rule of law. And we have a justice system that is supposed to ensure equal justice under law for everyone. Today, the New York justice system made itself a global laughingstock. This was a political decision that every banana republic in the world recognizes, and they know exactly what this was. This was partisan Democrats lashing out at their political opponent. And I got to say, Greta, I held out hope that on a 12-person jury there would be one who would hold out and say, I will not participate in this fraud. I will not participate in this political attack. And sadly, there was not even one.
What about, you know, we weren't able to watch this. There are no cameras in the courtroom. I realize it's a state court. States get to decide what they want. Federal courts get to. But in your mind, should cameras be in the courtroom? Because, you know, the American people don't get to see what goes on when there aren't those cameras.
I think there really should have been cameras in this courtroom in particular to see the absolute abuse of power from this trial judge. This trial judge, I think, has diminished the credibility of every judge in America. Because, look, when you go into a courtroom, God forbid you go into a courtroom as a criminal defendant or you go into the courtroom as a civil litigant, you expect the judge to be fair. You expect the judge to be impartial. You expect the judge to follow the law. This judge was a partisan. He should have worn a Biden campaign hat while he sat at the bench. His rulings were absurd. I got to say, those jury instructions, it was obvious he had one objective, and it was to get Donald Trump. Now, that's not a judge's job. It does ensure reversible error, and I believe this decision will be reversed on appeal. I think it is a certainty that it will be reversed on appeal, but I think in all likelihood that will happen after the election. And the entire purpose of this sham prosecution was the two words you read right before you had me on. You read Joe Biden's campaign statement, and with words that surprise nobody on planet Earth, they refer to Donald Trump as a, quote, convicted felon. You and I are going to hear those words repeated by Democrats and the corporate media about 1 billion times between now and Election Day. That was the whole point, is to scream felon, 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 felon. This was politics and not law.
The statement also says, Senator, that the threat Trump poses to our democracy has never been greater. I mean, is Trump a threat to our democracy? Is it that fragile? And what is it that Trump's going to do to it?
You know, not remotely. And there is an irony, which is that whatever the left accuses their opponents of doing is almost without exception what, in fact, they are doing. So every Democrat beats their chest and says, we must defend democracy, we must defend democracy, when they are mounting the greatest assault on democracy America has ever seen. I got to tell you, Sigmund Freud, I think, is spinning in his grave because the Freudian projection we are seeing is remarkable. In over 200 years of our nation's history, there has never been a former president or a sitting president indicted, not once. And by the way, we've had former presidents who the other party hated, and yet they didn't indict them. They didn't prosecute them. That's something banana republics do. In the last year,
well, it's interesting that you raised that, because the irony of it, that whole irony thing, is that during the Trump 2016 campaign, they had that slogan that he would get his crowds to lock her up, yep, referring to former Secretary of State Hillary Clinton. But he never ever tried to lock her up. He never used his Justice Department to do something. But that is, but the mantra about Trump doing that, and yet he had the perfect opportunity, he never did.
That's exactly right. And look, Democrats argue that Trump will be an authoritarian, Trump will be a dictator. Listen, he was president for 4 years. He didn't do any of that. You look at his Department of Justice. He didn't use it to persecute his enemies. You look at the laws. He followed the laws. He didn't issue lawless executive orders. In contrast, Joe Biden over the last 4 years has been the very embodiment of lawlessness. The worst example of that is our southern border, where he refuses to enforce immigration laws, and he has aided and abetted the criminal invasion of the United States of America. But that Biden has followed that pattern over and over and over again. On his $1 trillion student loan giveaway, it was obviously lawless. Every lawyer told him that. He knew it. He did it anyway to buy votes. And, of course, the Supreme Court threw it out. On his COVID vaccine mandates, he forced millions of people to get vaccines. He had no legal authority to do that. He knew it was lawless. He did it anyway. Of course, the courts threw it out. These prosecutions are obviously lawless. They know this will be reversed, but they do it anyway because they're willing to abuse power. And simultaneously, they accuse Donald Trump, well, he's going to abuse power.
Well, I must admit that I thought that mantra was silly at the time, to lock her up, and I knew that it was never going to happen, and indeed it didn't happen, and no action was taken. All right. In light of the fact that he will soon be convicted, I mean, technically you're not convicted till sentencing, is that any impediment to running a state felony conviction or even a federal felony conviction to run for president?
Zero whatsoever. The Constitution does not require that you not be a felon. He is still eligible. He is still on every ballot in America. There's no requirement in the Constitution that you not be a felon. In fact, you could be incarcerated. You could be on death row and still technically be eligible to be president of the United States. And so he will remain on the ballot, which, as you noted, the Biden administration acknowledged. This was never about removing him from the ballot. This is all about politically smearing him. This is all about giving Democrats and the media those two words, convicted felon to use. And by the way, I do not believe he will go to jail. That will be one of the questions people will talk about now is will they try to put him in jail right now? Even this rabid left-wing judge, I don't think will order him to go to jail. I think if he did, it would be immediately reversed. And I think if through some miracle they actually sent him to jail before the election, I think it would politically backfire, and I think Trump would win over 300 electoral votes because people would see it as a brazen abuse of power.
Well, also the irony is that, I mean, he can commit robbery in New York and not go to jail. I mean, he can do violent crimes,
right.
and not go to jail. So it would be truly extraordinary if he went to jail on these. So I mean, that is beyond, I think, anybody's expectation. I mean, that would be, bizarre. I mean, like I say, he can commit robbery in New York and not go to jail.
Sadly, that is the pattern. They let violent felons go day after day after day. Usually the revolving door, they let them go within a day. Now, I will say this judge is enough of a rabid partisan that I'm sure he wants to send him to jail. But I suspect that he will have a tiny voice in the back of his head that says, and this is pure politics, this would be bad politics, so let's not send him to jail pending appeal.
Senator Ted Cruz, thank you, sir, for joining me.
Thanks, Greta.